Hey everybody, it's your girl Urban Farm Sister. Good evening everyone and welcome to my show. I'll wait a few seconds for everybody to get logged in that's going to join the broadcast this evening. So I was supposed to present about, the rats, but for the last 2 weeks we've had a lot of, racial tension going on here in the United States, well as around the world. And so I just wanted to address that. I'll get back to that whole rat presentation. I'm gonna try to do it next Sunday. If not, I'll do it when I see fit. That is a major issue that we have to deal with. But I think we need to talk about, racism as it pertains to agriculture and science because, yeah, it's a big deal. So welcome everyone that is signing in right now. Thank you for joining. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Urban Farm Sister. If you're watching it on Facebook, because I'm live streaming on both platforms, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you'd like to become a patron on my Patreon, you can do so by visiting www.patreon.com/Urban Farm Sister. If you'd like to contribute to my channel and you don't want to use Patreon, you can also use Cash App. # Nadia Ruffin is my account. And if you don't want to use Cash App, you can always use PayPal. NadiaRuffin@gmail.com is my PayPal email address. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. So first of all, I'd like to thank some of my contributors that have either contributed to my PayPal, my Patreon, or my Cash App. This week's contributors I want to thank are Wanda Stargill, Speak Beautiful LLC, and Reed Lewis. Thank you very much for contributing to my channel. Because contributions like yours, it makes it possible for me to bring this information, as well as, have these accounts and things like that. So if you'd like to support this channel, you can go to my PayPal, like I had the links up a second ago, but it's PayPal, it's NadiaRuffin@gmail.com, Cash App, Nadia Ruffin, or Patreon, patreon.com/Urban Farm Sister. Again, if you cannot contribute financially, if you could just subscribe to my YouTube channel, that would help tremendously. The more people that I have subscribed, the more people that actually view my videos, I would eventually be able to monetize my information. So if you can't contribute financially, you can contribute just by subscribing to my channel. Also, I have a campaign going on for Agricademy Incorporated, which I'll talk about what Agricademy is in a moment. But if you can donate to my Farming is Essential campaign, I greatly appreciate it. I'm going to talk about, how I combat, racism in agriculture and science, and Agricademy, it was created because of that. And I have this huge project coming up, and I can't really get into specifics of it yet because I just received some funding for it, but I can't talk about the funding until, we sign paperwork and stuff. But for this project, I'm going to have to buy a tractor because I have multiple acres of land that I'm going to be utilizing to actually grow food, as well as doing some other projects and research projects. And so if you can contribute to this, you can visit agricademyinc.org/farming, or you can go to GoFundMe. I also have a GoFundMe campaign set up for it. And I have, you can also use my Cash App, which is for Agricademy, which is Agricademy Inc. But I'll talk about a little bit about what this is as far as how that's going to help combat, a lot of things that are going on right now. So a little bit about myself. I'm an entomologist. I'm a scientist, farmer, researcher, and educator. I'm located here in Cincinnati, Ohio. I have a bachelor's of science from the Ohio State University. My focus was animal sciences, as well as I minored in entomology and veterinary medicine. I have a master's of science from the University of Nebraska in entomology. I'm the owner of Quiwi Produce and Agricademy Inc. Agricademy Inc. is a nonprofit organization. Quiwi Produce is an urban farm that I created here. I'm co-owner of Agricademy Labs LLC. This is a lab that I created along with my co-owner Chandler Glover, where we actually will combat some of the some of the scientific things that are faced that Black farmers as well as Black scientists face. So we'll combat some of those things with the lab. Like I said, I'm an urban farmer. I grow in hydroponics and also grow in soil. I bought an empty lot here in Cincinnati, and on that lot, I actually farm. And I teach classes from there as well. I'm a beekeeper and also have chickens, so I teach classes in those areas. I have years of experience in floriculture. My family owns a flower shop here in Cincinnati called Blossoms Florist. And I also have a background in veterinary medicine and medical research. I've worked at the Ohio Department of Agriculture, the Ohio State University, University of Georgia, as well as the where else did I work? University of Georgia, and then I also work as a disease investigator at Hamilton County Public Health. So that's why when you see all those public health posts that I have, it's because I used to be a disease investigator. So either some of the awards and accomplishments I had, I've had a lot of people lately, like, kind of discount what I do, like I'm not really doing anything and I'm not really, effective with what I'm trying to teach and things. But I just want to show you guys that I've been into this since 2013. I have many awards. I've published things. I've been on TV. I've been on the news. I've won awards. I've gotten grants. I guess got another grant. So I mean, I've been in this for quite some time now. And my message has always been the same as far as, I do this to help educate the Black community and specifically, but I educate everyone. But I feel because I'm a Black woman that I must educate the Black community on, all the stuff that is involved in agriculture and science. This is a field that we've been pretty much excluded from for the last, almost 200 something years. Beyond slavery, we were really excluded from, even if we were inventors and things, our ideas and stuff were stolen and all that. So I'm trying to bring us back to, what this field is all about. So that's what I'm going to talk about this evening in this presentation. So how do I combat racism in agriculture and science? Well, my experiences, I went to Ohio State because there was not a land grant school, which I'll talk about what that is in a second here, that was a Black land grant school. So Ohio State was the only land grant school. I actually majored in a major that a lot of Black people did not actually are in. When it comes to agriculture, and it even comes to a lot of science, I mean, those are usually white male dominated fields. So when I went to school for animal sciences, when I got up there, I come from the city, and I come from Cincinnati. I didn't, I've always had a love for nature and agriculture and science and animals and all types of stuff like that. But when I went to Ohio State and I actually went to animal sciences, a lot of the people in there did not look like me. I had to experience racism. I had to experience, coming in there. I had actually did almost 4 years at University of Cincinnati as a biology major, but I felt biology wasn't going to give me what I wanted because I really wanted to learn about farming and, the farming and as well as agriculture, the whole, the whole industry. And going to Ohio State, it was like a shocker because, there was not a lot of people that look like me. There weren't at all. Like in the animal science program that I was in, I think there was a total of 6 Black people out of about 2,000 white people. And then, there were no black males in animal sciences. Maybe there might have been one, but the rest of the black people that were there were female, and it wasn't even a lot of black females. It was a lot of other people of color. And so, going in there and dealing with that, not being told about opportunities, just finding out about things. If I was not like an assertive person, I would have missed out on a lot of different things. Um, I actually got certified to, artificially inseminate cattle, and the only way I found out about the class is because they were telling another student about it. And I happened to come in on that conversation. I was like, well, how can I get involved in that? And they were like, well, it was almost like they didn't want me to, but now that I found out about it, they had to. And so it was like things like that, getting internships and things. Like I had an internship while I was supposed to shadow veterinarians and laboratory animal medicine when I was at Ohio State. And I was put with all the cleaning crew, because the cleaning crew was mostly black people that would dump the animal cages and stuff. And that was my internship for quite some weeks. And then when I came up and I asked the director, I was like, well, when do I get to actually shadow the veterinarians? Because that's what I came here for, to learn about, lab animal veterinary medicine. And they were like, oh, we didn't know you wanted that. We thought you just wanted to. I said, how did you not know that when I filled out the paperwork like these other people did? And the same thing said I was supposed to shadow veterinarians. I was supposed to learn about, how to do vaccines and all this different stuff, all these different treatments, shadow surgeries and all that stuff. And so, if I had not spoke up, I would have never had even gotten a part of my internship that I was supposed to. And so it's things like that I had to deal with as far as my education is concerned when I actually entered into this field. So then actually graduating, I had gotten sick during my undergrad, and, it's already bad they don't want you there. And then when you get sick and you have to miss classes, I was actually failed in a few classes because they would not let me drop them. And so that like totally eliminated my dreams of actually going to veterinary school, because, you can't have a low GPA uh, to go to vet school, because that's one of the criteria when you're applying to vet school. You got to have over like a 3.3 or something. But when I got sick, it dropped my GPA down to 2.5 when I actually failed classes due to a sickness. And so I just had to deal with a lot of stuff in my undergrad. And then after graduating, it was no different when you actually go and enter into the job field. And you realize like, okay, I was the affirmative action hire. I had all this knowledge because I did all these internships and stuff. I put myself out there. Like I would go to places and I would be the only black person there. And I was the pioneer for the next black person that enters into this field. Um but going in there and you're the only black person, and then you're finding out you're the affirmative action hire, it really affects you. It's like, oh, well, why am I here? And then when you go in these places and you're working in research and you're doing all the work, and then like you'll get acknowledged but not acknowledged like other people. Like you'll just get a thank you at the bottom, where other people got their name published in the papers and stuff. So I had to deal with a lot. Being in this field, working in agriculture, working in agricultural science, working in veterinary medicine, um, even going, going in when I minored in entomology, there were no black people that minored in entomology that or were even in the entomology department at Ohio State. So having to deal with that, and they looking at you like you're crazy because you're coming in here and they don't really want you there. So I've dealt with a lot of racism as it pertains to what I do. And that's why I decided that in 2018, I just got fed up with it. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to be my own independent person, and I'm going to be an own independent researcher. I'm going to set up this program called Agricademy to where I can go out and I can teach youth as well as other people that look like me about this field, because there's so much potential in this field as far as money, as far as opportunities, education, and everything. But we are deprived of it. They have 4-H and all that, but they don't really come to the inner city schools and teach the children about, what they can get out of agriculture. They might come in there and they'll show them how to start some seeds or something, or, but it's really not equipping them with the knowledge that they need to actually enter into this field. And so that's why I created Agricademy, which I'll talk about what that is in a moment. But it was so that I could go into these places, where it was people that look like me and I could educate about this field that we are being shut out of. So, what I do online is what I do every day of my life. Like I eat, breathe, sleep, think all day long agriculture, science, and how I can get this out to my people. Um, so I use social media a lot to do a lot of teaching. I use, like I do these things on Sunday and I try to educate you guys on things that are very important to our community. When COVID-19 hit, the average person, I'm not going to just say to the average black person, the average person didn't even understand how disease investigation even works. And, working as a disease investigator, I was able to, teach you guys about what's the process, what they're going to do next, what are the things they're talking about, explaining some of that terminology that they were saying on the news, because they were talking over people's heads. And if you didn't understand it, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to resort to being scared. And so, what I did is I tried to educate, I tried to explain, and I tried to explain the chain of command, why certain departments weren't doing anything at this point, and they couldn't because of there's a hierarchy of things that have to go before CDC can step in, before the state can step in, and things like that. And so that's why I use social media to educate you guys on things that are going on, now, because they use these things a lot against us, and they will use it against us, and they'll keep us in fear, and they'll keep us just below. They'll just keep us down as a way, just by teaching us these fearful tactics, talking about things that aren't even necessary to bring up, like when they brought up those murder hornets and all that stuff was not even necessary. That was an isolated incident. So, being an entomologist, I was able to teach you guys about that. All the things that I taught you about, they all fall under agriculture, and that's what I try to explain to people. Is that agriculture is a very, very important industry. It goes beyond just feeding us, and we don't know that. So, I have my education. I've gone to school, I've worked in the fields, I've educated you all about science and things like that. So my action was, I created an urban farm where I could teach people about how to grow their own food, but how to also grow food in a urban setting if you wanted to actually farm. I also created a nonprofit to address the lack of Black people in agricultural research. And then I created a lab that will help with many of the scientific issues we face as Black people in the agriculture sector, which will actually branch out into other sectors, because agriculture is the base for many things. It's medicine, it's our food, it's our energy. All types of things are involved in agriculture, and that's why I really want you guys to look to this industry as a possible place to find a career, or start a business, or even do research or whatever. All right, so about Agricademy, let me hold on, let me read some of these comments first. Good evening, Chandler. Good evening, Tracy Taylor. Hi, AB. Hey, Appreciable Assets. Thank you. I'm glad I'm appreciated. AB said you are greatly appreciated. Thank you, AB. Martha, she must tag someone. Madi Anderson, I appreciate you. Keep up the good work. Fawn B, thanks for all you've done. You're welcome. Gail Hayden, hi Nadia, I'm seeing my city in turmoil. I am fighting racism vigorously. That's good. So we all need to fight racism. We all need to fight all this. It all affects us all. Marty Anderson said it will keep us in darkness. Yes, and that's what I try to do. I try to shed that light on that darkness that they try to keep us in, because they use it to control us. Brianna said, hey. Nia Love said, I'll be sharing this on my website. Take out. Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing. Amanda Badger said, zoos are agriculturally, definitely need more diversity here. All welcome here. Yes, zoos fall under agriculture as well. I mean, I try to tell everybody, and people think I'm crazy because that's all I do is talk about agriculture all day, but it goes across so many different fields, so many. because it's a foundation. So if agriculture disappears, or when it pertains to the Black community, we don't even have an agricultural structure in our community. And so a matter as a result of that, we are taken advantage of all the time. We have to rely on somebody to supply our food, our energy, our it's just everything, our things we need to build things with, medicine, all of that. We rely on somebody else because we don't have that knowledge in that field to actually go about creating our own infrastructures and things like that. All right, Brianna said, I've shared this in the Black groups I'm in. I've learned about agriculture. My biotechnology research is massive. Yes, biotechnology is a huge industry to get into under agriculture. And that's what my lab is going to focus on. We talk about the GMOs all the time. We talk about Monsanto and all that. But biotechnology can actually be used for good, or you can actually use it to undo some of the things these big corporations have done to the communities, to the environment and things like that. And so it's very important that we learn about these opportunities. All right, so a little bit about Agricademy. Agricademy was founded in 2016. It's a research institution. Our research focus areas are agriculture, biotechnology, entomology, and technology. It was created to educate socially disadvantaged with an emphasis on the Black community, youth and adults about the agriculture industry by teaching agri-science, and that's the scientific applications in agriculture and offering career exploration. It also provides training and education online in various agricultural industries. We also teach about small-scale farming, entrepreneurship training, and we provide resources, connections to Black people and other people of color in the agricultural industry. So I've gone out with Agricademy. I've gone to schools, I've gone to conferences, I've gone to do talks, all types of things to teach about agriculture and, beyond just farming. Because everybody, when you say agriculture, they think you're just talking about farming, but agriculture is not just that. And this is just a list of some things that, fall under agriculture. There's many others that could fall onto this page. But things like agricultural biotechnology, genetic engineering, nematology, microbiology, plant biology, environmental science, entomology, food science, veterinary medicine, agronomy, waste management, weed science, plant fertilization, plant breeding, botany, chemistry, all types of things fall under agriculture. So you don't always have to be a farmer to work in this sector. Farming is a big aspect of agriculture, but there are a lot of things that go into even farming that we need people in. A farmer needs somebody that provides fertilizer, provides the machinery, provides maybe the engineering, and maybe they need some type of thing built. They need, an entomologist to come and tell them how to control insects without, using really harsh pesticides and things. They might need a microbiologist to come in and test their products for, enteric bacteria that can make people sick. They have to have waste management. Even plants can have waste and things like that. So you have to figure out how you go about managing waste if you have animal waste and things like that. You have to have somebody that's marketing your products. You have to have somebody that's packaging your products. You have to have somebody that's coming in and fixing your machinery that may break down. So there's so many different areas in this field that a person can get into that they don't ever have to even touch a plant, but they could still be part of agriculture. And that's what I try to teach. So I'll have people that come in that might work in one of these different, areas, and I'll have them come in. I try to find people of color, particularly Black people, especially when I'm going to the schools and things, and I'll have them come in and I'll let them speak about what they do in this industry. I've had a veterinarian come in, and she talked about, what it is to be a veterinarian, a black woman veterinarian, and she's here in Cincinnati. And so she came in, allowed the kids to do a physical exam on a dog, and she taught them about the different things that she uses and things like that. So that's what I try to do with Agricademy. That's one aspect of it. I try to educate on different careers and opportunities. And then I also do research. I'm an entomologist. I'm a scientist first. So I do a lot of research on, how can we control insects or, coexist with insects and still have farming, or still, insects impact our lives on so many different levels. It's not just on the farming level. I mean, insects come into our homes and they affect our our well-being, our pets, and things like that. So what I do is I research how we can coexist together without, us going out and spraying pesticide that's going to end up killing everything. And so that's what I try to do with the research aspect. But also I'm getting into this whole biotechnology thing as far as, undoing the things that, Monsanto and all these other companies have done, creating these GMOs and all that. You know, GMOs could have been a good thing, but they also are not a good thing because they don't have enough data to say if they're healthy or not. But a lot of these GMOs were created because, of insects and things that were destroying those crops. So if you could, somehow create not create but selectively breed plants that are resistant to these attacks from these insects, that's a lot better on the environment than creating where you're going to doing gene splicing and you're putting genes from bacteria or other life forms into a plant and things that wouldn't normally be there. So that's what I try to focus on and things like that. Let's see. I got another comment down here. Good evening, Carolyn Rawls. Miss Ebony. I'm not sure how to say it. I'm sorry. I wish I would have known about these fields when I graduated from high school. It wasn't discussed where I grew up. That's exactly what I'm talking about. If I had not have gone to these schools that I went to, a lot of these children would have never found out about, being an entomologist or, if you we covered so many different things. We talked about food science, we talked about, farming, we talked about veterinary medicine, we talked about research. And so when I would come in and I would bring examples, like real life examples of where this particular field falls into their life. Like we talked about the poultry industry and I brought chickens in, and we talked about, the egg industry and I brought eggs in and they learned how to candle eggs and they learned about what's an egg inspector. They learned about, what that inspector does when they go to these different facilities and they test these eggs and things for, uh, diseases as well as quality and all that type of stuff. So they learned about that, but they hadn't. If I had not came in there and showed them that, no one else would have came in there and showed them that. So they would have not even known that that was an option that they could work in. Bringing in a vet. Now these children, they see that they can be veterinarians too. When I would I might go to these schools and I have these children in classes, I always brought lab coats for them to wear so they could put themselves in the mindset of being that scientist for that day. So we talked about being a food scientist, and we would say we were talking about corn. We would go through the whole scientific how corn is grown and the different things that people use corn for. Then we'll learn about the corn industry and how much money it brings in just into the state of Ohio versus nationwide. Corn brings in billions of dollars to this country every year because it's used not just for food, it's used for fuel and things like that. And so I taught them about that. And I was like, you can work in this industry. Say you don't want to be a scientist, but if you actually, had a corn farm and you got a contract with BP, they would have to pay you to grow this corn and you sell that corn or say soybeans or whatever to them. And they would use it and they would extract the ethanol from it and they would actually put it into the gasoline that we use for our vehicles. And so it was just opening up their eyes to that agriculture is around them and science is around them all the time. And they don't have to be intimidated by these fields, because I think a lot of people, when it comes to science, they're intimidated by it. It sounds, like, oh, that's too much. I don't want to enter into that field. But if you see that science, you're dealing with science every day of your life. From the time you wake up in the morning, your whole body itself is a science experiment. Then it takes that, that fear away from, maybe I can enter into this field. And what are the steps I needed to do to get involved in this? And so that's what I try to do. But yeah, like you said, it's not brought up in these schools. I don't know. It was just always in me, but it wasn't even brought up when I was in high school. And I went to a Catholic high school. When I kept telling them I wanted to go to school for, agriculture, I was looked at crazy because, I lived in the city. So yeah. And then I was black, so that black people ain't supposed to enter into this field. That's what they act like we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to want to enter into this. And a lot of us think of it as slavery anyway. And I try to explain that it's not slavery. Slavery was just one tiny aspect of agriculture. We were doing agriculture way before we were enslaved. So we need to remember that. We need to go back and learn that. All right, so how do we get to where we are as it pertains to agriculture, in particular farming? So the United States Department of Agriculture, it was created on May 15, 1862. President Abraham Lincoln signed legislators to establish the United States Department of Agriculture. It was created to oversee all the agricultural endeavors that took place under the Morrill Acts and the Homestead Act. So I'm pretty sure you guys have heard about the USDA. If you have not, USDA, they oversee all the agricultural aspects of this country. From importing to, learning new techniques to inspections, all types of things. The USDA covers those as it pertains to agriculture. So what's the Morrill Act? Morrill Act of 1862, also called the Land Grant Act. It introduced by the U.S. Representative Justin Smith Morrill, Vermont. It granted 30,000 acres of public land to every state for each senator and representative as determined by the 1860 census. Money made by selling these lands went into a perpetual endowment fund, which would provide support for colleges of agriculture and mechanical arts in each of the states. Abraham Lincoln signed this act into law on July 2nd, 1862. So basically, this Morrill Act was passed so that it would allow states to, it would allocate land and money for states to create land grant schools, so land grant universities. So it was predominantly in the beginning across the southern states. Like Alabama, Georgia, they all have land grant schools there. So some of the land grant schools that were initially created were like Auburn University. I'm trying to find the southern states because then there were some other states that were added later on, and later dates that became land grant schools. And then we're going to talk about the 1890 land grant schools that was for Black people. Another one was University of Delaware, University of Florida, University of Georgia, University of Kentucky, Louisiana State, University of Maryland. So these were some of the universities that were created during this Land Grant Act, the Morrill Act of 1862. So also during the same time, the Homestead Act of 1862 was passed. During the same time to passing the Morrill Act, President Abraham Lincoln on May 20th, 1862, passed the Homestead Act, encouraging Western migration by providing settlers with 160 acres of public land. So settlers were people that were coming from Europe to, find land and opportunity here in the United States. In exchange, homesteaders paid a small filing fee, which was $10, and they were required to complete 5 years of continuous residence before receiving ownership of the land. So the reason that Morrill Act was passed is because these people were coming in, they had no clue how to farm. So they had to show them how to farm. So they created these universities so they could show them how to farm, how to utilize their land, how to, grow their own food, how to, just set up a homestead. And they were provided land for free, $10 fee. And then you had to maintain this land for 5 years. So they had to learn how to maintain that land for that 5 years so they could actually keep it. But during this whole Homestead Act, this displaced many native populations, pushing many onto reservations or they were killed. Many wars between natives and the government ensued. One of the biggest wars was the Battle of Wounded Knee, where almost 200 men, children, and women were killed by the U.S. government. So up here, I have it's a picture of, this is like one of the actual ads that was, circulating around the populations of Europeans. Basically, they were selling Native American land. They were taking their land from them. They would go in and kill them, or if they didn't kill them, they would send them off to reservations, pretty much imprison them on these reservations, take their land, and then they would give it to these European settlers so that they could set up and start a new life here in the United States. So it's amazing that the things that occurred in this country, when people get mad about people rioting now and, getting angry about what's going on, and then you see stuff like this where they actually use brute force to force people off of their land to take it to give to somebody else. And then people try to say, well, well, how are you being violent? But they use violence to do this. They use violence to do this. Children were killed. Women were killed. Men were killed. People's land was stolen. I'm only touching the surface of the whole history of this whole homestead and this Western, migration of these Europeans. But there was a lot of killing that went on, even down to the buffalo. Millions and millions of buffalo were wiped out by the U.S. government so that Native Americans didn't even have a food source, because they knew that they used them as a food source, and as well as clothing and everything else. They wiped out the buffalo that used to live on the plains to where there was not enough to sustain the Native American populations. So, when I see people rioting and things, I don't feel bad, because I'm thinking about all the violence that was used against people just to take over this country, and set up this whole racist system that we have right now. All right, so then there was a Second Morrill Act that was passed in 1890. The Second Morrill Act was passed, and it's supplementing by direct appropriation of income from the land grants. So there was money from the first land grants that was used for this 1890 Morrill Act. States had to show that race or color was not a criteria for admission, or designate a separate land grant college for blacks in order to receive the money. So when I always tell, especially black people, that we are always used in everything for the benefit of someone else, financially, people always try to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, but I do. We are always used for somebody else's financial gain. So instead of the states allowing black people to come into, the land grant schools that they had built, they built, money was given to the states to build schools just so black people could not come into those other land grant schools. But with this 1890 land grant act, Morrill Act, what it did is that it gave states money. It didn't give black people the money directly. It gave the state the money to designate where they wanted to open up colleges, or what colleges that they suggested would be land grant schools. So it didn't even give us any land. It just gave the racist people that were not allowing us in their schools, it gave them more money to build schools to keep us out of their schools. And that's how we ended up with the 1890 land grant schools for black people. And I didn't even go into, there was a third act, Morrill Act, that took place in 1992. 1992, and this was for the Native Americans. I didn't even go into this one because I want to stay on topic right now with, black right now. But I will do a whole discussion about how, this affected Native American populations as well. But in 1992, a third Morrill Act was passed for Native Americans that allowed them to have land grant schools on their reservations and things like that. And again, it was no land granted to them. It was money granted to the state to say which schools could be land grant schools and which ones, or where a land grant school could be created. But the money was never directly given to these people. So the money was never directly given to black people. It was given to white people to tell black people where they could have a school, or what school that they already had could actually be a land grant school. So it was you had to look through the reading, you had to read through it and see like the small print, because it says land grant, but they didn't grant any land to black people or Native Americans. Remember, they just took all the Native American land, and then, they didn't give us any land, which I'll talk about the 40 acres and a mule in a minute. But the first Morrill Act gave, go back to it, it gave these new settlers 160 acres apiece of public land. And it gave them, it also offered them free education so that they could farm that land and prepare it so they could be able to keep it after that 5 years. So it's a lot that went into this. So when people try to say, why do black people just not, do this and this and pull themselves about their own bootstraps? It was a whole system set up that kept us out of this. So these are the 1890 land grant institutions. Some of them, I don't know if they have, the U.S. Virgin Islands is one of them. It's not on this list. But the most recent one that was added was the land grant school here in Ohio, was Central State University, which was in 2014. It was finally given land grant status, but Ohio State tells them how to spend and disseminate and do what they need to do with their money. And I don't even want to get into specifics of that, but they're still doing the same thing that they did back in the 1800s. So we still don't have any control of these land grant schools because, they were the ones deciding which one is which one would be a land grant school and how the money would be allocated and set up and things like that. So we have a history, and history just keeps repeating itself over and over again. Because we keep allowing it. We don't ever, say, what, this, you gotta stop right here. We got to get this under control. We got to get out from underneath their control. But a lot of us want to stay under this control, but this is what happens. And when things are allocated to us, it's always somebody trying to show us or do it for us. And that's the problem. We don't need people doing things for us. All right. So in January 1865, General William T. Sherman met with 20 African-American leaders who told him that land ownership was the best way for blacks to secure and enjoy their newfound freedom. So during this whole time, this is during the Civil War, Emancipation Proclamation has been signed. The 13th and 14th Amendment has been signed. Then we have these land grant acts, Homestead Act, it's a whole bunch of stuff going on. It's probably kind of like what's going on now. Like all this stuff is happening at once. You got all these people going here, there, everywhere. You got war going on. You got people fighting Native Americans, stealing their land. You got people coming from Europe. They're trying to set up home. You got, all these freed slaves that don't have anywhere to go. And so then it was promised to a population of slaves that, they were going to get 40 acres. First, it started out at 20 acres. It was allocated 20,000 acres by Lincoln, and each one of these, freed slaves would get 20 acres, and then the number was changed by this General Sherman. So on the 16th of January of that same year, 1865, Sherman issued Special Field Order Number 15. The order reserved coastal lands in Georgia and South Carolina for black settlement. This land was confiscated from white Southern landowners. So during the Civil War, land was taken from these Southern, landowners as a punishment for them, with the whole Civil War that was going on. That they took their land from them. And so this land was supposed to be allocated to these 40,000 former slaves. And each family would receive 40 acres. And then later Sherman agreed to loan the settlers an army of mules. So that's where the 40 acres and the mules came from. But 6 months after Sherman issued the order, 40,000 former slaves lived on 400,000 acres of this coastal land. So this is, like I said, it's along Georgia and South Carolina. I think it's where the Geechee people live and things like that. That was part of that land. But what happened is they took the land back. The government took the land back and gave it back to the original owners. The original white owners that had this land after, they signed some treaties and things with the South and the North and all that. And so they took that land back. And then even the land that was available, some of the people that had control over it, they were spiking the price up to where, these freed former slaves weren't able to afford it in the first place. So once they took the land back, that left these freed slaves, homeless again, pretty much. And so what they had to do, they were forced into what is called sharecropping. So they were living on this land, but it was pretty much like slavery. And a lot of them were sharecropping on land that they were originally slaves on, or their family might have been slaves on. And so, many of the blacks were sharecroppers on the land, and their families were once slaves there. And they did not, and being a sharecropper in this sense, it did not provide much money to the families to buy or acquire their own land. So, sharecropping could be a good thing, but in this case, it was not, especially as it pertains to black people. Um, what happens is a tenant lives on a landlord's property. They bought food and clothing from the landowner. The landowner provided tools for growing and harvesting it. And after crop was harvested, tenants usually receive half of the proceeds. So, the it was just pretty much slavery. They just called it another name, sharecropping, if you want to call it that. But it was slavery because these people were, they're unable to really provide for their family, and then they're farming all this stuff all year long. Their landlord, which is the owner of this land, that used to be plantations and things like that. He's providing all the harvesting equipment, the farming equipment, but he's charging you a price to even use that, and then he's charging you a price to live there, and then you have to buy your food and your clothing from him, and then you're farming all year long, and then that crop that you farm, you have to split it with him, which a lot of times you didn't even get to split it. He would just take it all, the whole profit. So, you know, sharecropping was not a good thing. And the sad part about it is there are still people alive that were sharecroppers. I have a neighbor that used to live across the street. Her family was sharecroppers in Kentucky. She's still alive. So this is not that long ago. Sharecropping it went well into the 1900s. And so there's still people alive that can tell you their stories about how they were done wrong, and and it still exists. They still exist, and there's probably even some sharecropping still going on, even in southern states where there's in isolated areas. So we need to know that this stuff happened, and that this is how we got to where we are. All right, so we're gonna talk about the USDA a little bit, because they were created to oversee agricultural aspects that pertain in this country. But the USDA is a federal executive department responsible for development and execution of federal laws related to farming, forestry, rural economic development, and food. There's a long history of the U.S. discriminatory practices as pertains to blacks. These things could be denial of loans, denial of land, services, and even seizure using an eminent domain to take people's land. The USDA programs like FHA, ASCS, and FES, established to aid poor farmers, discriminate against black farmers by favoring wealthy white farmers. These programs engaged in predatory lending, which provided little to no assistance or benefit to black farmers. Between this period, farms owned by African Americans plunged from 8 million down to 272,000. So, you know, yeah. So this is how we got to where we are, and it wasn't by accident. It wasn't that black people didn't want to farm. It wasn't that black people didn't want to be involved in agriculture. It was that we were systematically shut out when this USDA was created, and then there was laws and legislation, and then we had Jim Crow, and we had lynchings. We had all this stuff that would decide that I don't want to stay involved in this because it's too risky. I mean, you own some land, and then the government can come in and do eminent domain and just take your land. That's an issue. But they created all of this. They came in and they took the land from the Native Americans. So why wouldn't we think that they would come in and not take land from us? I mean, they've done it, and they keep doing it over and over again, because again, no one puts them in check. No one, addresses the elephant in the room. We want to, keep putting a Band-Aid over this issue, but it's a real issue. And all that's going on. Police brutality is one thing, but a lot of this other stuff, it it needs to be discussed, and it needs to be brought front and center, and it needs to be eliminated for real. Just like they want to defund, the police, the USDA might need to be defunded because of the things that they've done to populations of people, not just African Americans. I mean, there's things that they did to the Chinese people that they brought over here and enslaved. They would deny them land and all types of things. So, yeah, I see a comment over here. Yeah, they're still taking land. They're still taking land from us. They still, if you go to the USDA offices and things and you ask for services, if you try to apply for loans, we're denied astronomically on a daily basis loans. And a lot of people meet the criteria. And if you don't get the loan, if they do give you the loan, they don't give you enough to, maintain your operation. And so if you default on the loan, the first thing they're going to do is take your land, and that's what's happening. And so they set it up to where you're going to end up defaulting so that they can take your land. They don't want us having land, because having land gives us opportunities. And I'm going to talk about how we can combat that in a second. But having land does give you opportunities, and you don't always have to resort to getting funding and things from them. If you have the land, you have the opportunity to actually, build those funds yourself on that land, but you have to utilize it correctly. All right. So one of the most recent cases that was in our time was the Pigford and Glickman case. It was a class action lawsuit against the United States Department of Agriculture, alleging racial discrimination against African American farmers and its allocation of farm loans and assistance between 1981 and 1996. The law was settled on April 14, 1999, by Judge Paul L. Friedman of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. To date, almost $1 billion has been paid or credited to more than 13,300 Black farmers, under the settlement's consent decree. So consent decree means that they settle, but they're not going to admit no wrongdoing. And, you can take this money, but you're not going to say that we did anything wrong. So, to have that even put in there, that's not even right. But that's how these people were even able to get a settlement. They had to just say that no wrongdoing was done by the USDA, when in reality it was. Under what is reported to be the largest civil rights settlement to date. In December 2010, Congress appropriated another $1.2 billion for what is called the Pigford 2 settlement for the second part of the case, because there was about 70,000 more farmers that didn't get to apply to the first case. So another 70,000 applied, and they were allocated these $1.2 billion. I think each one of these farmers got $50,000, which is nothing. When it comes to certain farm operations, you got a big, huge operation. $50,000 is like $1,000. It can go so quickly. And so, they did this settlement, but one thing, it cleared them of any wrongdoing, and then it wasn't enough. I mean, these people, it was almost 20 years for this battle to get $50,000. That was nothing. When a lot of these people during this battle, they lost their land because of, either they couldn't farm it because they didn't have the money to afford it, or, they might have had one of these loans that, they end up forfeiting or, defaulting on, and they had their land taken away from them. So land wasn't given back, just this money was given, and it was just settled like that. So yeah, this is why we are in the situations that we're in, because of things like this. We have cases, we kind of win, but we don't really win. We have, it's all types of things that go on that, keep us where we are. So how I plan to combat racism as it pertains to farming. Anybody have any questions? I see some comments over here. Hold on. So BB Bissett says, yes, my friend's family has owned 200 acres in Savannah since the end of slavery. Yep. Salima, aka Dynamic Mom Enterprises, she said, "Teach Queen, you bring us powerful information in every video. I'm absolutely sharing this. I am so grateful for you and all that you are so courageous to do. Peace and love." Well, thank you for sharing and thank you for tuning in. And yeah, like I said, I want to educate my people on what's going on, so how we got to where we are and how we can undo what we are. But the only way you can undo that, you have to be educated and you have to know what's going on and you have to know like how to prepare for the next step. um, Bank 80 said sharecropping was still popular into the 70s. Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm pretty sure because I saw a documentary of a that was done about 3 years ago, and they were going through. It was a young black guy. He was driving through with this historian. It was a black lady, and they were trying to find people that you know were, I can't remember if they were descendants of slaves or whatever, but they were driving through the southern parts of Louisiana and Mississippi, and they were visiting farms that were owned by white farm owners, and there were black people still living there, and the way they were talking, it was like these people were still their slaves. Like the guy didn't want to leave, and they wasn't letting him leave. So I mean, I had to find it. I'll share that link. But I had to find that story. But this was in 2000 and like 17, and so this stuff still goes on in these remote areas where people are, cut off really from major big cities and things like that. There's so much that goes on in those areas. When they talk about the deep south and they talk about racism and the Klan and lynching and all that stuff still goes on today, but it's so in such a remote area, a lot of times we don't even know about it. So having that documentary done, it showed us that this stuff still exists today. Like I told you, there's still people alive that are older now that they were indeed like sharecroppers. So they're still here. D. Holman said, "The government is still taking land from us. My family is fighting the state of Texas right now." Yep, they're still doing it. They're still doing it. And then like I say, that thing like having a class action suit, it did nothing. Like they didn't even admit they did any wrong. So they're just going to keep doing the same things because they can. Because at right now we feel that we're powerless against them. But there's things that we can do so we don't have to rely on them. And that's what I'll talk about in a second. BB Bissett says land is power. Yes, it is. Land is power. Land is actually more powerful than sometimes even money. If you have that land, you can generate money. You can generate a whole bunch of other things as well. All right. So when I said how I was going to combat just farming discrimination and things like that, is I'm trying to teach people about small scale farming. So small scale farming is the production of multiple crops and livestock on a small piece of land for profit. I want to focus on land that's 10 acres or less, and I really want to focus on people that live in urban environments. It does require a lot of money to start up and the equipment or buy a lot of equipment to get started. But there's a lot of things that you can actually do on a small piece of land that will actually bring in a lot of money to where you don't have to farm 40 acres of land, or, uh, you don't have to have a big operation, but you can still be profitable. The smaller ones. So small scale farming is a way that we can combat this because it's important to have small scale farming. Number one, it can combat food deserts. It can provide locally grown food and other products. It can create revenue and jobs in an area. It can create niche markets. It's small scale, so it's not taking up a lot of room. And you can utilize spaces that have been abandoned. You can even farm things indoors. And if you don't want to farm, this is where I talked about, you can integrate these other areas into this. So say you don't want to farm, but you can provide like the fertilizer for these farmers in these urban areas or these small scale farms, or you can provide the say they're growing in hydroponics, you can provide those hydroponic setups, or you can provide the plants that they need or the seeds that they need. Or you can be like me, the entomologist, that I can come in and I can tell them how to, control insects on their property. or if you have land and you can rent land out to people, and allow them to farm on that land, or there's so many different things that you can do that you don't always have to be the one growing the plants. But small scale farming could be an answer to combating not having to go to the USDA. There are so many different these are some examples. So you can grow in hydroponics, you can cultivate bamboo, you can cultivate mushrooms, you can do garlic, herb, spice production, you can do vermiculture, you can do beekeeping, poultry farming, food crops, all types of things. And these things can be done on a small plot of land. And if you're growing the right things and you're growing what is wanted in your area, you can generate money. So I know a lot of people, they seek out trying to get loans and things from the USDA, like a $50,000 loan. Like, that settlement was $50,000. So if you were trying to get a $50,000 loan from the USDA and you had land, and you wanted to farm, say, cattle or something, you could actually take and allocate, an acre. Say you had 30 acres and you just wanted to use an acre. You could take that 1 acre and you could grow a crop, or or something on that land that would actually generate that $50,000, that you could do that in one grow season. So then you wouldn't have to resort to going to the USDA and asking them for money for a loan that is eventually you're going to owe interest on. So you're going to owe a lot more than $50,000. And then if that's even they give you the loan. But if you have this land, or it doesn't have to even be an acre. If you're in a city or something and you have land and you can, grow these crops and things, you can create this revenue that you need. And so you don't have to resort to, getting loans, or, going out and begging the people that actually, put us in this situation. And so that's what I try to do, is I try to teach that with, to small scale farming. And so that's going to be my project that I'm going to be working on, that I still can't tell you much about yet. A few more weeks, I can tell you all about it. But it's that farming is essential, but there's a lot to that I still can't say anything until we can actually do a live presentation about it. But this is, this is how I'm going to combat just the racial part of farming, as it pertains to, this country. Now, I've already started tackling the other things when I go into the schools and teaching, and, and then I teach you guys online all the time and things like that. So I'm actively always fighting to, change agriculture. I want to change the color of agriculture, because right now it's pretty white and it's pretty male dominated, and I'm trying to change that. So that's why I work hard every day doing what I do. Let's see. BB Bissett said, believe it or not, Clarence Thomas is a good on Black land ownership issues. Yes and no. I don't put too much faith in politicians as it pertains to land ownership and a lot of this stuff. Because you got to remember, at the end of the day, politicians, they're campaigning for a job. So at the end of the day, they're just getting a job. They really can't. They can say they're going to make these promises and things like that, but in the end, they really don't. They don't follow through, or it only helps a certain percentage of people. And and at the end, we're usually the ones left out. And so, I try to find solutions where I don't have to rely on a political party, or, a specific politician. I try to do things that I can, be self-sustainable myself, and, come up with my own solutions, because that's not promised. I mean, they'll take whatever just to get your vote. And at the end of the day, a lot of times those things don't happen that they promise, or, somehow, well, I was going to do it and then this came up, so we can't really focus on that. Or it turns into, it's going to benefit everybody. It's going to have this trickle down effect, which it never trickles down to the Black community. So, I don't fall into that, that whole political aspect. When I see a problem, I figure out how I can tackle it myself. And we go from there. And then if we have to utilize some of these sources outside of that, we can, but we're going to try to utilize the source that's going to be the least, I would say, dangerous. So if you can find like grants and things instead of trying to get loans, I would do that. Um, so things like that. And I'm going to do a a live on how to write up grants proposals, because I see a lot of money that is out there, especially right now with COVID-19, that we could be benefiting from. But a lot of us don't know how to write a grant proposal up to even apply for that money. And I've gotten grants and things. I've wrote a lot of proposals up. Gotten grants, and I've not gotten a lot of grants, but I think I figured out the cheat code. So I've done those presentations in person before, and I'm going to do it online, so that people can get that knowledge as well. Because a lot of people think that if you have a business, you can just get a grant, and that's usually not the case. There are some business grants out there, but for the most part, grants are allocated to nonprofits or anyone with those 50C type statuses that's through the U.S. government. Um, there aren't a lot of grants for actual business startups. Um, like I said, they're out there, but there's not that many. But I can show you guys how to write that up and what's needed in the grant and things like that, because yeah, I've seen so many grants being produced just for COVID-19, and again, they're trying to use the Black community as a source of funding. So they created all these grants that is going to help save the Black communities, because we're the ones that's suffering from it the worst, and we're not. That's a lie they told. Um, and again, like I said, we're always used for somebody else's financial gain. It never fails. We're used in public health, we're used in medicine, we're used in jobs, everything. So yeah, I'm going to teach you guys about how to write those up, the specific things that are needed, and then you can go from there, writing your own up and seeing if you can actually get some of this funding, because COVID-19 has created a lot of opportunities. I know a lot of people were scared and sitting at home and not doing much. I took advantage of these months that we've had off, and I've gotten a lot accomplished. Um, writing up grant proposals, getting land, all types of stuff. So I use the time wisely, and we still got time because they still ain't really open up this country like it should be. So you guys need to just get educated on a whole bunch of different stuff before it opens back up to what we used to be. Even this civil unrest, it'll settle down. It'll go back to normal because they're already doing this. They're already doing the stuff they always do. They give us all this symbolic stuff. Oh, they're gonna write Black Lives Matter on streets and all that. That's not gonna change the wealth gap. That's not gonna change food insecurity. That's not gonna change racism. That's not gonna do anything. And so they're already up to their same tricks that constantly work on our community, and we'll be happy with that, and then they'll go back to doing the same thing. The police right now, they're still beating up the protesters. So it's not even effective, because that the protests were against police brutality, and they're beating protesters up, putting them in chokeholds and locking them in cages and all types of stuff. So it really isn't, the protesting right now really isn't effective, because the people that it's supposed to be against, it's not even working on them. They're still up to their same tricks. So that's why we just got to keep moving forward, and we have to figure out how we can possibly police our own communities, create our own businesses, our own infrastructure within our own communities. But it starts with that you have to have a mindset that you want to be self-sustainable. If you don't want to be self-sustainable, then we're always going to be forced to rely on somebody else to provide everything for us. And that's what I try not to do. I don't want these people providing things for me, because it comes with a price. All right, so off on my little rant there. So that's the end of the presentation today. Like I said, I only scratched the surface, because there was a lot more I could have talked about. I've made posts about this in the past on like Instagram, and they're on my Facebook. But they weren't video. They were more like you had to read, and it has like the whole history and all this stuff about all those acts that were passed, the war, the amendments that were passed, and things like that. So, um, if you do a search on my Facebook, you can pull them up easily. On Instagram, it's kind of hard to go back and search and look at things, but it's on there. But if you are interested in taking any of the classes and things I offer, you can visit my school website. It's actually a new address. I have a new school website. I've been transferring all my classes over to this new site. It's www.kiwiproduce.farm/courses and not school. But there, I try to upload all of these lives that I do, as well as I offer courses that you can purchase and things like that as it pertains to um, all the things I teach and all the things that I, do. So there's courses on there about beekeeping, um, hemp, how to get started in the hemp industry. I could talk about the whole cannabis thing and the racism that's associated with that, but that'll be another discussion for another day. Um, I have chicken classes on there, how to grow seeded watermelons, all types of classes on there. So you can visit the site and you can purchase some of those classes. And like I said, these lives will be on there as well. I'm still uploading those. Um, but if you have any questions, you can email me urbanfarmsister@gmail.com. Like I said, I'll have a a big announcement coming up probably near the end of this month. But I want you guys to know that agriculture is very, very, uh, it's very important, especially for our community that, we're really not involved in this industry. And as a result of us not being involved in this industry, it has put us in a bind. It has put us, you know, well, we have to depend on somebody else to do everything for us. Food, water, and shelter. That should be our top priorities. And that's what we go to work for, is for food, water, and shelter. But they can take that job from you at any point in time, and then your food, water, and shelter is at jeopardy. So we have to figure out how can we control our own food, water, and shelter, and not have to depend on someone else to do that. Because when you're having to depend on someone else to do that, you're going to always be in slavery. Um, and real quick, again, if you want to support my channel, you can do so by either using PayPal, Cash App, or Patreon. If you like to use PayPal, it's NadiaRuffin@gmail.com. Want to use Cash App, it's $Nadia Ruffin. And if you'd like to become a patron, you can go to patreon.com/Urban Farm Sister. And I appreciate you all for coming on this evening. And I have two more comments. Awesome. BB Bissett said, awesome class. Please email me at, is it Erica Fletcher, so that I can get you on the list. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. D. Holman said, thank you for sharing your knowledge. You're welcome. Like I said, thank you guys for tuning in this evening. And I hope you guys go and do more research and look into what I actually did teach you guys this evening, because it, like I said, I only scratched the surface. There's so much that has gone into keeping us in the position that we're in, and they work hard to keep us in the same position. You think about when they destroyed our communities, Tulsa, Rosewood. Those are the ones that you hear about, the big ones, but there were multiple Black communities that were destroyed. That they don't really teach about. They definitely don't teach you in school. You have to find out about these things on doing your own research. I went to college and I learned. They teach you with the textbook stuff, but a lot of what I learned was actually going out and when I worked in the field, and then actually doing my own research and learning on my own. That's how I learned. The school only sets the foundation. You have to still build from that. Everything ain't textbook, so you need to know that. Two more comments. Madi G. Anderson said, thank you for sharing. Would you like Would like more information on grant writing, give me your email. Just send me an email because just send me an email, urbanfarmsister@gmail.com. Um, but I'll put up a post and it's gonna be a live. So if you're subscribed to my channel and you have notifications on, you'll know when it's gonna take place. It's gonna take place probably on uh Wednesday or Friday of this coming week. So just make sure you're following my YouTube. Because if you follow my YouTube and you're subscribed and you have notifications on, you'll see when I have these lives. And then I also post it on our other sites as well. And then it'll also stream on Facebook as well. So you can get it on both of those places. Carolyn Raw said, thank you for your knowledge. You're welcome. Thank you for tuning in, Carolyn. Shaw B said, my mother and I enjoy this, especially as it pertains to her experiences as a sharecropper. Would she be willing to, Shabi, would she be willing to come on and talk about that? Would she be willing to come on and do a live? And you can send me an email if you don't want to answer that on here. Let her think about it. But I would love to hear her story. And I'm pretty sure others would love to hear her story too, because people act like, this happened so long ago, but it didn't, because we still have people alive that can tell this story. Blaine said, just got on, but I will go back and watch the feed. Cool, thanks. Carolyn Ross said, you are right, especially learning about ourselves. Yes, we need to learn about ourselves because we're getting a watered down, sugar-coated history of ourselves. So it makes us seem like, we are not powerful people, but we are. I mean, before slavery, we were farmers, we were scientists, we were doctors, we were all types of things. And then slavery interrupted that. And, we were still doing those things even during slavery, because, a lot of times we weren't afforded doctors and things like that. We had to treat ourselves, we had to feed ourselves and things. So we are great people, but we can't allow history to make us look like we were not. We got to tell our own history and we got to do our own work. Okay. Shabi said, she said, yes. Oh, please. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Yes, definitely email me. I'll put my email right here in the comments. Okay, and that's my email. But definitely, and if anybody else on here is watching and they have relatives that were sharecroppers, I would love to have them come on here and they're still alive to tell their story, because we need to hear this and we need to see this. Because like I say, people act like this didn't happen. They try to always tell us like, oh, that was so long ago. Why are you bringing up that slavery stuff? It wasn't that long ago and it's still happening. So, we need to know these stories. BB said, thank you for the email. All right. So thank you guys for tuning in. I'm going to head on out. I'm a little bit past my hour. But I thank you guys for tuning in. And again, if you can support my channel, I appreciate it, so I can keep all this information coming. And I will see you guys again, probably sometime next week. I actually have another live I'm going to post this evening. I'm going to have Aaron and Kyra come back on, and they're going to talk about food and how to store food and things, and how to ration out meals and how to prepare rationed out meals and things. Because like I said, we got a lot going on right now as COVID-19 is concerned, and our food supply chain is being depleted. And that's what, I'm trying to combat. But until I can combat that, and others that are in the farming sector can combat that, we have to, do things that will spread our food and store our food and things like that. So they're going to come and talk to us on Thursday about that. And I'm about to post that this evening for that live. And then I'll post the information about the grant writing proposal live also this evening, so that we can get that going. And then I'm going to try to talk about those rats on Sunday if I feel that it's pertinent. But if something else comes up this week that needs to be discussed, we will talk about that first. But the rats are important because their populations are quickly increasing and they had a potential of spreading disease. It's just that I felt that this was more important to talk about right now, since this is the climate of the this nation right now. Blaine said we need to organize movement to stop the loss of land and start using it so it's not a liability but a positive cash flow asset. Exactly, Blaine. And that's what I'm going to work on. That's what I've been working on. And Star Storm said hit the like button. BB said yes. And then Blaine tagged someone on here. All right. So you guys have a good evening. Thank you for joining in. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.